Okay, so sorry again, we're late broadcasting. So discussion is about the Diagnostics Summit agenda, and I think that lightning talks I think sound fine to me. Do we have a list of proposed people or topics?
I don't. I was actually thinking about just filing an issue and then CCing people onto it to get some, feedback on whether they want to present anything.
Okay.
I was thinking like everybody who is participating this time probably may have something they want to present.
That sounds fine.
I mean, if we don't get enough participation, we can also just drop it.
Okay. Okay. I think when we went into it last time, like last year, we sort of had some rough structure, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we had a relatively. Let's open up the. Like, I think we had a bunch of topics. So we basically said, okay, so key themes. So we started in with like, end user perspective, general post-mortem proposed. That's key themes part 2. So we talked about like monitoring, debugging, platform neutrality, testing, and documentation. So sort of basically, we had some of the key themes that we wanted to have some coverage on. Mm-hmm. And then we did breakouts for the rest of the sessions.
Yep.
So then the goal would be that we have at least that level of structure defined before people show up, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good idea, just to say like, okay, of the things that the bigger picture things we want to make sure we talk about, let's have somebody giving a bit of an intro on each of those. Mm-hmm. To get people thinking and moving. What do we already have on the list?
So there's a set of unsorted topics to discuss.
Yep.
Unhandled promise rejection, post-mortem debugging, async hooks, new ideas for tooling, network inspection, tracing, best practices, progress on tiers for tooling, insights from help, repo, and problem symptoms.
Yeah, if there's anything missing, then just add them.
I mean, I guess I'd look back to the post-mortem priorities and issues, monitoring, debugging. Are those still like key themes that make sense, or is it, or do we have other themes that have emerged since then that would make sense to?
So I think the tiers for tooling generally make sense to discuss.
Yep.
Even if it's just taking inventory of what we have.
Right, bringing everybody up to speed, and maybe we can come up, with some next actions, or
mm-hmm.
That kind of comes under the testing and documentation one.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, it does.
Async hooks. So I don't know, like under what is that? That's possibly
monitoring,
under
right?
Monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole trace events thing, is it worth having? I don't know if Ali's going to be there, but
I'm going to be there.
Okay, so it sounds like, that's one where we've heard Perfetto. Is it useful to have some sort of summary of where we're at on that and what we need to work on? Is that sort of well captured and already discussed?
And I think there's definitely need for some review of where Perfetto is. So Calvin, who actually couldn't make it today, like he is planning to start working on Perfetto sometime really soon. So it'd be good to give an overview of what Perfetto is and how it would relate to Trace Event.
Yep.
So it would make sense to me, like just looking at the existing themes, if we had like a monitoring section, that was one piece of it. And then is like async hooks another piece of that?
Yeah, I guess the question is like how do we proceed with async hooks from here on? And
yeah, still like how do we get it out of experimental,
right?
And how we proceed? So it, you know, that might, I mean, we probably need breakout sessions on some of those, but if those two sort of seem to me like an intro as a key theme on monitoring, covering something on those two would be a good start.
So can we just start like typing in this doc right now and fill in some of these sub bullets for each of these things?
Sure. So do we want to keep each session like half an hour or 45 minutes?
Whatever we think makes sense.
Yeah, I can't remember last time how long this breakout.
Last time it was mostly like 30 minutes per.
There I can see some were 15, some were 30.
Yeah, breakout sessions were like 2 hours each.
Yep.
To just give more time and to do deep dives.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having those still be like, but it's the themes to sort of get us thinking and then figure out what breakout sessions we want.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we type in here, if we talk the morning, yeah, I've just followed up with Dan. I haven't heard back on anybody from PayPal yet. But like if we assume like after lunch, we start with, well, actually we started at 10:30 last time, so I don't know. Let's see.
Let's see. Well, we started with introductions at 9, so yeah.
Okay, well, when we get we can probably fill in the times afterwards. Debugging, are there specific things on the debugging front we want to talk about?
I don't know. Do we want to put post-mortem debugging as part of debugging, or is that like a separate thing?
I think it should be a separate thing. It's
okay.
a topic to discuss.
Okay.
Okay, so under post-mortem debugging, I could see one thing we still need to figure out is our heap dump strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do we recommend? How do we I mean, I think, you know, that we've had issues about like perhaps pulling in the heap dump module into core or some capability to generate heap dumps. There has been discussion though that maybe you can already do that effectively enough through the inspector API. But I don't think we have a solid like consensus on, hey, this is the way you should do it. And
are we talking about heap dumps as in heap snapshot, or are we talking about like core dumps that we call
that part was heap dumps.
So JavaScript heap, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was actually thinking about, you know, how do we use core dumps?
Core dumps also fits under that as well.
Uh-huh.
With LL Node and.
Yeah, but there's different things though, right? Like.
Yep. So I mean, on the heap dumps, I guess actually, and I was going to typing in LL Node update on heap dumps, but I guess there's other proposals, right?
Yeah, there's this proposal to like there are several different ideas how to use core dumps.
Right. So I think that's a very core dumps. So would it make sense to have like an LL Node update just as and then an overview of that other alternate proposals?
Yeah. And I mean, what also would count into post-mortem debugging is stuff like stack traces, especially async stack traces. And here's where the line to debugging gets blurred.
Yeah, there's some overlap, I think.
Right, because you can either want them in a core dump or you can want them in your
Can we say something like debugging a running process and debugging a non-running process, or debugging locally and in production? Can we make that distinction?
Yeah, I guess.
To be honest, I don't think it matters, like whether we have it in post-mortem debugging or live debugging, as long as we cover it in one of the two. Right? Or do we even, we could just lump in post-mortem and live debugging into the same topic and then have, you know, some be one and some be the other too, I think, unless we're going to get different volunteers to do different sections kind of thing.
So what is there exactly to talk about for live debugging?
I just said it to make some distinction. Maybe it's not a good idea.
Yeah, so I mean, off the top of my head, I don't really know what there's to discuss on live debugging. I mean,
The thing
stuff
that
like setting breakpoints work and stepping works.
Yeah, the thing that came up over the last few calls that I think hasn't had a lot of traction is, can you get network?
Oh yeah, okay. Network inspection, I guess.
Yeah, out of Node. And then there's probably like an open discussion of, are there other you know, protocols that make sense for Node to support. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it's probably, you know, an interesting discussion at a high level for people to have.
So does profiling count into this, or rather into monitoring?
So, I mean, like profiling and monitoring, I think, are two separate things, right? Monitoring is like you've got an app and you want to know when, you know, certain things happen in the app, and profiling is like, hey, you've got a perf problem and you're sitting down and, you know, rerunning test cases and looking into, you know, flame graphs or whatever. So I think monitoring is distinct from profiling.
So how about in those sessions we quickly take inventory of what we have and what needs to be done, and like what is missing, and then leave enough room for discussions in breakout sessions.
So that,
because otherwise, I could imagine that there are topics where we say, okay, this needs to be done, and there's not much discussion.
Right.
And there are other topics where, you know, there are several solutions and we actually want to just figure out which one is the way to go, and then like discussions start, and that takes way longer than the session we like allocated for.
That's exactly what we did last time. Like the initial ones were basically to sort of frame where we thought we were, identify gaps or things, and then based on that we could create the breakouts to go into more details.
Okay, that sounds good.
So sorry, so how do we capture this in the topics to discuss? Like there's a bullet for talking about live debugging, or
we could just leave that on the agenda. It says, okay, now let's, you know, switch over to live debugging. We know that we can debug with the Chrome, you know, the Chrome tools or the command line tools. Is there anything else like gaps or things that we are hearing that people are complaining about? And
right, and if not, then we just skip right over it.
You know, but the comment that we sort of have a sort of high-level discussion and see how deep things are, and if we need to sort of have more discussion later, breakouts later, was that specifically directed to this live debugging topic, or was that more general?
I think that goes for all of them.
Yeah, I think too. So instead of like the agenda review, what I have here from 10:15, we could just allocate like 2 hours to go through everything and take inventory of what we have and what we think is important to discuss, and then set time aside for actual like in-depth discussions. Because I could imagine that there are people who are very passionate about certain things and others don't really care.
Yeah, that will be the case, I think.
Yeah, and I think if we can find, like, you know, so for the monitoring one, I think it's useful to have, if we know that there's some areas that it would be useful to bring people up to date, to have pre-lined up volunteers, for example, to say, you know, talk about tracing in Perfetto, talk about async next hooks, and if there's somebody who can spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes to frame that, that's not bad to have lined up in advance as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the big areas, we had post-mortem, so we got that on the list. Monitoring, we got that on the list. Debugging, we had on that on the list. We have live debugging and post-mortem debugging, okay. Platform neutral APIs we had on the list, and then we had testing and documentation. So there I'm just typing into the thing. I think under testing and documentation, we have best practices. So hopefully Jarish could kind of give us an update on that. And the other one would be tiers of support. I think those were the main categories. Are there any other main categories people can think
There's
of?
another section, I think, if you scroll down in the doc, Michael, where there's topics to discuss and sorted.
These
Yes,
are
okay.
especially the ones, yeah.
But I like your high-level structure. I just think we need to make sure we incorporate the content under this into the sort of high-level structure that you had.
Right. Right, yes, okay. Because, yeah, we can reuse a bunch of that, you're right. Loader hooks profiling. We did have profiling under monitoring last time, but, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I think that per your earlier comment, Michael, does this have an owner? I think that's like, in my mind, it's like somebody probably needs to take this, kind of sketch it out a little bit more. Like, I would guess that when we meet next time in 2 weeks, we can sort of be clear about, you know, what people need to kind of show up with, so we have a productive conversation.
Yep.
And yeah, and I don't know precisely who that person is.
So I think it generally makes sense for every topic to have an owner and sort of break down into like, maybe not details, but give a summary of where we are and what kind of things exist, and sort of kick off the discussion.
Yeah.
And
so maybe we can get a volunteer for each one of those. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I think that works.
So like, I'm putting my name down between testing and documentation.
Great.
I was going to say me and Jarish.
I would like to do the post-mortem debugging, but I would also, if it's not too much asked, Seth, are you going to attend? Yes,
No,
you.
unfortunately, I can't make it this year. I already had a different vacation planned. But
I see. Okay.
But thank you.
So is there anybody from Microsoft who is going to attend the Diagnostics Summit on particularly this topic? Because I think there was some question about whether you wanted to attend.
I think we've got 2 people going. I don't remember exactly who they are, so I don't want to name any names. But
okay,
there will be Microsoft people in attendance.
Okay, because I would have suggested for me to do give a brief overview over the post-mortem debugging story, but then also somebody from Microsoft to sort of give an update on what you have implemented so far.
Okay. We could certainly talk about who might want to take that.
Yeah, maybe you can volunteer to find the volunteer. Is that?
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if I am going to be there, so I don't want to sign up for anything.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, and I think we can have multiple people within this the main sections, right? We just want somebody who's going to like give an intro to the main section, and then if there's people who can talk about specific ones in addition, that makes sense for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, if it becomes kind of a dialogue, it's not too bad either.
Yeah. The async hooks next steps, is there anybody who's going to be the right person to talk to that one?
Matteo. We
Who is
could
that?
volunteer Matteo.
Matteo?
Yeah.
He's coming and
He is coming, as far as I understood.
okay. Sure. You can throw people's names on, they can always change, say, wait a second.
There's this intersection with the other proposal we were talking about.
Right. Yeah. With the async context.
Yeah. So, Mike, you're not going to be there.
Well, I don't know. I need to. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I've got a number of other things, and trying to carve the time out for the travel is. I think there's different ideas about how I should use my time. And so I realized that there's some impact there. I talked with Mark. Mark has some, family events that are scheduled for that period of time. And so he's not traveling. But let me see what I can do. Because I realize there's impact there. So
if you're not going to be able to attend, would it make sense to have a sort of a brief write-up of where you think the async context stands?
Yeah, and we owe that from the last conversation in December, where we had a set of actions that we needed to go and fill out some more detail on, and this summit would be, I think, a good forcing function to at least get that content or get those questions answered. So I'll commit to that. But whether or not I can attend, I think is still TBD. Hopefully I can have it nailed out in the next week or two. So
I'm just looking at our past agenda. Sorry, maybe I'll bring that up I'll ask first, are we finished talking about async hooks?
I think so. I think there's still questions, but I don't know if there's anything else to say now.
Okay, because the thing I wanted to bring up under monitoring was, I think we've kind of stalled on the trace point addition, like adding new trace points. I don't know what people's perspective is on that. Like there's talk about Perfetto to have a new engine to capture those trace points, but I don't know that we have the trace points we would want in Node and so forth.
Right, but for that, I think James would be the person who knows most. I mean, he added the binding for tracing in JavaScript, and I think he has added a couple trace points to file system.
Yeah, like I think last I heard, I was when I was trying to get somebody involved with that, we were waiting to get the bind, whatever, I think the binding is what you're calling it, the thing where we could efficiently do it on the JavaScript side.
Right. And I think James is also taking part.
Okay, so why don't we say James, right, on that one?
Is James going to attend this, or?
Yeah. At least he said something to the effect a while ago.
Okay.
So I think it would be good to I just wrote it in. Let's tag him with where are we at with that?
Mm-hmm.
Because in my perfect world, if we're ready to start adding a bunch of trace points, we should be doing something at least to encourage people or make that on their radar as something they could contribute with, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think like the other thing with trace points is like it would be interesting to know how they're being used. I think today, like the trace points that we have, and you know, because part of me wonders is the fact that you know we haven't necessarily seen a lot of trace points being added. Is that due to some of the instability in that the trace collector that should be mitigated with the Perfetto thing?
Yep.
Where that there was just some instability and people are like, well, yeah, you know, it's not there, so I'm not going to start, you know, chasing after it. Or is there some other thing going on there? But that would, I think, be an interesting thing.
I think that's certainly, you know, I think we were waiting to be able to do them effectively at JavaScript was a blocker, but you're probably right that that instability would have also been another, if you started to try and work with it and it didn't work so well. But having, yeah, so talking about that whole general thing, getting a bit of an update, and then, you know, we can probably have one of the breakouts to dive into like, okay, how do we, what are the concrete next steps to make progress on that front?
Yeah. Okay.
We had talked about this one. I don't know if it's worth the documentation guidance, the module developers guide. Is that worth?
I think it's worth putting
revisiting?
it on, and if there's no interest, we can cut it, right?
So I'm going to put that module developers. So that goes under testing and documentation. We can, you know, give the 1 minute overview of what that was intended to be, and then we can see if we get into a discussion or not.
Okay, and outside of that, we do have a couple of presentations that we want to schedule, right?
Yep. There were the ones we were trying to get in at the beginning as sort of like, here's a view, a view of, you know, real life use to sort of frame our discussions. So then you had to present the unsorted lightning talks.
Yeah, I mean, we can also fold the lightning talks into what we just discussed, because these are a lot of topics, right?
Yep. I think the like the introduction to open census, I definitely think we should get that in there. The how V8 engineers debug crash dumps, and then if we can get one other invited speaker, that would. I'm just thinking like for the first morning, what do we want and how many? And the status of no clinic bubble, doctor. That's.
I can do that.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a half an hour for each of the three, except for maybe if we get like an invited outside one, we try and make that longer.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah.
So why don't we update? We could update the morning so that it's those three plus a an invited talk if we manage to get somebody.
Do we want to put all the presentation on the same day, or do we want to keep one of them on the second?
You mean like the morning as a kickoff?
Yeah. Because otherwise, it might be very tiring to have everything, like all the breakout sessions on the second day.
Right. Yeah. Some of them, like it'd be nice to have seen. Well, actually, no. I mean, like, say if I think the invited one should be if we get somebody would be we should have the first day, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I'd even vote for the intro to Open Census to be on the first day too.
Okay.
And then the other two on the second day. I mean,
that's okay. Yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
I mean, Matteo is not here to be angry,
Right.
but I don't really care which.
I think it's fine for a straw man, and
Sure, yeah.
things will evolve, I think.
Yep.
But yeah, I do think it's nice to sort of have, some of the talks or some of the things sort of interspersed with some of the breakouts, right? Just to kind of break things up.
Yeah.
That said, it's sometimes nice to have some of the talks that are informative and will, have impact on some of the breakouts ahead of those breakouts. I don't necessarily know how to balance that.
I think even the second day, though, the second day at the beginning will be before 2/3 of the breakouts. So maybe when we plan our breakouts, if somebody says, well, wait a sec, this breakout is really better than the, how V8 engineers debug crash dumps, we can schedule that for the second day versus the afternoon of the first day.
Yeah. So the breakouts are going to be when? There's going to be a breakout from 11:15 to 1 on the first day. Is that right? We
could do that. No, actually, I was thinking we at least should get through all the topics that we discussed here.
Yeah.
From monitoring to testing and documentation, and that probably will take longer than just 30 minutes.
I mean, I think
the agenda review is going to go from 10:15 to 10:45, and then 11:15 to 1, and then lunch, and then afternoon breakouts. Is that what you're thinking?
Yep.
Okay.
Because I suspect, like, if we had 2 talks, half an hour each, or maybe like an invited one for an hour, that's our hour and a half. Getting through all of these sections, like even if we assume they're 15 minutes each, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's like another hour and a half. So we have like 3 hours to 4 hours before we start to get into breakouts.
And I think that's okay. I think there's a lot of how many of these different things do we have here? We've got monitoring, profiling, post-mortem debugging, live debugging, testing, and documentation.
So that's 5 spread over what, 2 hours and 15 minutes. So yeah.
Okay, so that is, what is it, 130? So that's maybe 20 some minutes for each, right?
25 minutes around. Yeah, around 25 minutes each. That should be enough. Or at least.
I guess what we don't have in there is presentation number 2.
Yeah, and having right after lunch is kind of lame too. It's like everybody just ate and ready to snooze.
But that's probably a good time for a breakout.
Ready to snooze.
Well, just because you're more interactive, right?
Is 25 minutes too long to go over some of these things, or
it could be?
Can you limit the sort of the agenda review to sort of?
Yeah, what we could also do is
short, but if it's 15 minutes, then you end up with, 75 minutes of time, an hour and 15 minutes.
Something like that. Does it make sense to break agenda review into 2 parts?
It may, yeah.
Would be a context switch, but might also be refreshing.
I was almost thinking, though, that you do like presentation 1, presentation 2, and then go into the agenda review.
Okay, we could also do that. Yeah, actually.
Yeah, let's do that. I like that.
And then a break in the middle of the agenda review probably doesn't hurt.
Yep. So then we have a break, and then we have agenda review. Let's say 10 to 11. Oops.
That goes to 12.
Oh, yeah, times don't match up. 11 to 12, and then 12, 15 to 13. Something like that.
Yeah.
And then lunch at 1. Lunch is the one that we can't move because
You can't move that.
I mean, I can move it earlier because it's like we have a table reserved so that we don't clash with the rest of engineers.
Right.
And then for the afternoon, it's breakouts essentially.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, we can then make that two breakout sessions in succession.
How long were the breakout sessions last time?
2 hours each.
2 hours?
Yeah. With like a half-hour break in the middle, I think.
Yeah. But that can be very flexible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unless we've got simultaneous breakouts and people are wanting to,
That's true.
Yep.
There's some coordination, but yes, we can be. There's a degree of flexibility.
We can certainly make them like an hour and a half with a 15-minute or half an hour break in between the first day.
And then what?
Well, I think that would be 6 to. Oh yeah, no, that's about right.
And then some sort of recap.
Yeah, I think a recap wouldn't be bad. Maybe a volunteer from each of the breakouts to just give a quick recap.
And then I guess I'll find some place for dinner.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, and that's day 1.
That looks good to me.
And then for day 2, we can do the same format for presentations, I guess.
Yep.
And then the rest is essentially like, again, time for breakouts. And well, what else do we have?
Yeah, that was big. I mean, last time, if we look at the one for the second day, it was just like, breakout, lunch, breakout, review, break, and breakout, review, continued, recap, and actions.
Mm-hmm. So we do want to have a break in here, and then at some point we also want actions. Is there anybody who needs to leave early or kind of early so that we have to, finish early? Because last time I think there were several who had to leave a little bit early to catch a flight.
I'm not leaving till the next day.
Yeah, I would suggest that like if that pops up, then we try and be somewhat accommodating, but I don't know that we want to necessarily adjust the schedule around some people that have to leave early.
So
like we could front load sort of important things in the morning, right, to accommodate folks.
So you mean like have actions before lunch? Kind of
hard to have those before you've gotten through everything.
Yeah. So maybe at 15 to something.
Yeah, that might be good. It's like you have sort of a recap at 1500.
And then afterwards, if people still want to stay around, then that's also an option.
Yeah, you could have some blocks for some sort of additional working sections. My experience has been that these things are pretty draining. Usually talk that much, so.
Yeah, planning to finish at 4 isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we still have some time for, between the break and lunch.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have we could fit in one breakout before lunch and one or two after.
So yeah, there's one. And the other one that's going to be lopsided.
Well, how long were the breakouts on the previous day? They were an hour and a half.
An hour and a half, right? Yeah.
I mean, on the second day last time we had one, which was, oh no, that was a break. Well, we had some which were 1:15, like a minute 15 to adjust. So this one's an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then an hour.
You could slide in a half hour of lightning talks if
there is any, yeah.
If there are some.
So I think this is pretty good. At least I think the level of detail I think is much higher here than it was whatever an hour ago.
Yep.
And I think it's probably good. It's at a good point to get feedback from other people who aren't on the call. That is like, hey, this is the current proposed agenda. Let us know if there's anything missing or people have, any.
You want to volunteer for something?
Yeah. And I think there's enough flexibility in some of these things that we can wiggle some things around, right?
Yeah. I mean, it totally could turn out that some of the breakouts have so much interest that we'll just have one session for everyone.
Yep. Absolutely. In terms of the, if PayPal doesn't have somebody, and it sounded like that was a good chance, but Dan was still going to check, who would be the next? Is there anybody else we'd reach out to?
I don't know. I think Thomas said something like he had some contacts actually in Munich.
I thought he'd actually checked them out, and it was a no-go.
Yeah, he was checking with, I think it was Uber or
right,
something like that. They migrated their stuff away from Node to something else. They could maybe provide like generic stuff to talk about, but I don't know.
I mean, otherwise we could if there's an update from Netflix, or I don't know if there's anybody else who's in the group of people who said that they're going to be there as opposed to an outside group, because I know asking somebody to come just for one section more of an ask.
I am in a conversation with folks from Netflix, but to be honest, I'm not planning to invite them to the summit. I don't think it's a good usage of the time, someone to fly to Munich just only for a half an hour session. Yeah. But I am planning to have that kind of presentation for just some diagnostic meeting.
Yeah,
I mean on the phone.
Right.
Even if Netflix had a list of talking points about what are the pain points in diagnostics for Node.js, that will also be useful.
Do we have any big Node users in Europe already that it might be a shorter trip to pop over and talk a bit?
So we do have Dynatrace is like some people from Dynatrace is going to be here as well. Not sure though whether they want to give a presentation.
Has somebody reached out to them yet? I know we mentioned it.
Nope.
Okay.
But we can.
I think that would make sense. I should hear back from Dan, hopefully. I'll try and see if I can chase that up today or tomorrow. And unless the answer is yes, does somebody know the people at Dynatrace and be able to ask them if they could?
Yeah, I'll just ask on the bug itself.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a plan. But I think the other comment about bringing somebody to one of the regular calls, where that's still very valuable, so we should pursue that.
Yeah, I am working on that.
Okay, great.
Okay, is there anything else we want to do here for the agenda, or do we think we've got enough here to kind of let it cook for a couple weeks and then drill in next time?
Yeah, let's revisit this next, or even the time before we have to submit.
Okay. Yeah.
And we have a fairly good structure already. So
yeah, I feel pretty good about it now. There's a number. We've only got about 7 minutes left, and there's a number of other things here on the agenda. So I thought maybe we could do sort of a lightning, burn through on this thing. I think the next one is 227, which is post-mortem debugging support inside V8 Node.js. I don't know if Seth is still on the call or if he had to drop. I think Matthias, you're on.
Yeah, so on this, there's going to be a meeting tomorrow with Seth and a couple of people from V8. It's still, I at least don't know yet which one is the best solution. I think currently we do have around 3 different solutions that we could discuss, like how to use a core dump. I don't think I have made up my mind yet, and like I said, there's still discussions going on.
Okay.
Will the meeting be open?
I asked Daniel to forward you an invite.
Okay.
I think he's sending it to the email address GitHub account, so if that is correct, you should get it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else on that one?
Yeah, I think it's just a bit too early to discuss details there.
Sure. Okay, number 211, the best practices guide. Any update with that? I know I saw some activity and bounce around my inbox, but
yeah, I don't think there's anything really new since the last update.
Probably Mike was not present on 16th when we met. So the bottom line is we met and briefly discussed about what are the structure, what should be the content on the best practice, and what are the tools we want to prioritize, and who wants to pick up items and things like that. The minutes of the meeting is in issue number 271, and probably we should spend some time in the summit to elaborate more on what are the tools we need to project based on the capability as well as the symptoms that are reported in the field. And we can reiterate one more time on what should be the structure and things like that.
okay, and there's a slot for this on the agenda for the summit, right? I did see something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The deep dive topics number 168, no update there. But maybe when we get, like, if we want to do a Netflix presentation or something, we can sort of schedule that as we think appropriate, either in this time slot or use some external time slot there. Tiers of support, any update?
I don't have an update, sorry.
Okay. Async hooks, any update from anybody? Okay. The async context formalization stuff, I don't have an update, but I did say we have an action to kind of get to this next level of detail around some stuff, and I will do that before the summit. So Trace event, any update?
So we already mentioned this before. Calvin's getting started on Perfetto from the backend side, and I think James has the overview over the front end of this. So yeah, I mean, without James being here, I don't really know.
Okay. And then number 75, network inspection support. Any update from anybody there?
Yeah, I think for this, we really need to find an owner, because essentially what this boils in like what this really means is to just implement the inspector backend for like reporting network activities. And yeah, as long as we don't have an owner, this is not going to be get done, right?
Yeah, Matteo. We should ask Matteo about you know, where he thinks you know, this fits in his world. I think he was the one that asked about resurrecting it on the agenda like a few weeks ago. So maybe at Summit we can figure out like, hey, does this thing have legs, and does somebody want to drive on it? Can we make progress? If not, we just sort of should pull it off of here, I think. So.
Yep.
Yeah, at least off the agenda.
Yeah. All right. Anything else from anyone?
Nope. Took a few minutes in the doc there. So
great. All right. Perfect timing. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye. See ya.